Hello, everybody, and welcome to Analysis. Also, Merry Christmas. I have a special broadcast for you today. I've asked my friend Trey Smith to join me, and we're going to have a look at one incredible prophecy. So welcome, Trey Smith. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Diane.
And
Yes.
of course, it's Christmas, and everybody is doing Christmas-themed broadcasts. But we decided today to have a look at this very special prophecy, and we're going to do it together, Trey. So on February 22nd of 2014, my dad had the most incredible day of prophecy that he's ever had. It was on this day that he prophesied the impeachments of President Trump again and again, referencing the gold and imagery that you could see he was seeing President Trump and Melania, and also the alignment of Israel and the United States of America and what God was going to do with them at the same time. So we've seen a lot of this prophecy, this day of prophecy fulfilled. But there are things that he prophesied on this date that have not come to pass. And so that is what we are going to look at together today on this special Christmas broadcast. So again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you Trey Smith for joining me on this special Christmas Eve broadcast. And so we're going to start by having a look at the first segment of prophecy on this day, February 22nd, 2014, that has not yet been fulfilled. And this particular part of the prophecy has to do with another Snowden arising. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll come back and analyze it.
And then God says, highly embarrassing moments when another Snowden arises. And people will become very afraid. They'll say, we have no protection. And then God says, am I impressed with your weapons of war? Am I impressed with the strength of your men's legs? Ha! I have said I will bring this nation to its knees. And God said, you have been humbled, and yet some more. And then you shall hear the sounds of great victory. For where are the people gathered? Where are my people gathered? Where is the sound of unity from my people?
So, what is interesting about this prophecy that I just want to start off here with is that my dad sees another Snowden arising. So who was Snowden? Edward Snowden worked for the NSA and exposed how they were illegally spying on American citizens. And he actually is in Moscow now, where they have allowed him to go live over there because he's in a lot of trouble with the American government for revealing classified information. So that's kind of the gist of Snowden. Most people know who Snowden is, and if you don't, you can look him up. There's a movie. They even made a movie. But Dad saw another Snowden arising. And what's interesting here is just this past week or so, I think it was about a week and a half, Brandon Biggs was doing his broadcast, and God showed him another Snowden arising. In a different way, obviously. He didn't use those terms, but he saw this other Snowden, and the people who were watching his broadcast in the chat started to tell him, Kim Clement prophesied this. So he called me, and we had a conversation about it, and of course, people had shared the video with him, so by the time he spoke to me, he'd already seen. But very interesting, because this is something that we have not seen fulfilled. And, you know, Julian Assange with WikiLeaks was a candidate at some point, but it doesn't seem to fit as time has gone on. And so, you know, and there's some other things he describes surrounding this other Snowden, which is exposure, and people being afraid. So perhaps it's, you know, he refers to weapons of war, God saying, am I impressed with your weapons of war, the strength of your men's legs? he makes a point of referring to America on her knees. Now, right after 9/11, my dad produced an album of worship music and prophecy that he titled America on Her Knees. It's no longer actually available anywhere, but it was something he released after 9/11. And, these are some very interesting points because, you see this other Snowden arising in highly embarrassing moments. But along with that, you see that people are going to be afraid. God challenging, saying, am I impressed with your weapons of war and the strength of your men's legs? And of course, that's scriptural. And about a humbling of the people. And after that humbling, we would hear the sounds of great victory. Now, when Biden was president, I think part of this was in there. We were really humbled during that time period, but I'm not 100% certain. And the thing about prophecy is when these prophecies are fulfilled, it doesn't need to really be explained. Trump will have 2 terms. That's easy. He did have 2 terms. So we knew once he was elected the second time, that was a fulfilled prophecy. And if you know the prophecies, it's very easy to tell when they're fulfilled. So that's why these are so interesting. So Trey Smith, when you hear about him prophesying another Snowden, along with the other points that he made in that section of the prophecy, what are you feeling and what are you seeing?
So, Donna, the first thing that I would be feeling about all of it, this is a very important year as it regards to your dad's prophecies. So it was rare, and I'll come back to the Snowden in a second. It's very rare that your dad gave a date on anything. But one of the most profound prophecies that he gave was where he said, I've been taken, this rarely happens to me, and I've been taken into the year of 2027. And he kind of took in a deep breath and he said, I'm here. And he said, if every warrior could just get a glimpse of what I'm seeing and what I'm looking at. And then he said, Lord, where will I be and the children that you've given me to look after? And then he fell down and he began to cry on the keyboard because he knew that he wouldn't be there. But he was seeing a glimpse of a future where things were far different than at the time that he's giving the prophecies you're talking about right now as we talk about these. So in the course of this next year, a lot of the prophecies that your father gave have been fulfilled up to this point, where there were 2 terms, but he said there would be highly embarrassing moments as another Snowden arises and people would become very afraid. He said there would be an exposing of great evil, and I will start at the top. And I believe all of these things kind of go together. And he talked about terrorism in New York and New Jersey and the Bronx and even along the sea. He talked about this takeover that would happen that was that sounds a lot like Islam. Let me share with you. I had Greg Scroggins. Can I share with you something that Greg Scroggins called and told? So,
yes.
So at the end of your father's life, one of his closest friends was Greg Scroggins, or at least a man that he got together with very, very frequently and would drive him to these meetings. And I've had the chance to talk to Greg over the years on a variety of different occasions. And it's interesting because he called me a few weeks ago and he said that he had what he thought was, that this had not happened to him since the time he was together with your father. That he was woken up and there were these surprise attacks by Islam. And it had to do with fentanyl, and it had to do with poisoning people, and it had to do with soft drinks at convenience stores, I think, in his vision, and coffee. And I don't want to scare or shock people, but he said it was so real to me, and I had not had this happen since I was together with Tim Clement. But he said, I saw this plan where they were at 7-Elevens, I think he said, or something like this. And I don't want to get anyone in trouble, so I don't, it's just a vision. So it could be an example. But he said people were drinking the drinks and hand in hand with terrorist actions happening, that people were feeling like they were going crazy and people were even dying from fentanyl. And police, of course, get their coffees at, convenience stores. But he was telling me that, and I don't know if that's an actual thing that's going to happen, but in the course of those dialogues, he was telling me about your dad and his garden and that what your dad would do. And he would go out there and he would pray. He would have a couple of iPads, or at least one iPad out there on maybe a podium. And he'd literally be going through the names of people and praying for them that he'd written to the ministry, and also praying heavily for Israel and America, two things that are being attacked the very most right now. In these prophecies your dad gave, the parts that haven't been fulfilled yet are the breaking of the chains that'll come off of America, which we're anticipating is going to have some fights. You can see that that's what's coming on the horizons. You had your two terms, you had your impeachments, and this whole list of things that shouldn't have happened, that have happened, that your dad knew about in advance, where you're coming up to the very top or the eye of the pyramid, and something's got to give, and everybody knows it. Everybody in the entire world, Donna, is in a holding pattern, wondering what's going to happen, and everybody knows on both sides of every continent of this globe, both good guy and bad guy alike, that something big is about to break. Just the other day on the news, Donald Trump stated that he called Jared Polis, who's the governor of Colorado, he basically called him a weasel. He called him a piece of garbage for not letting Tina Peters go, and stated that cartels were in control of that state and the elections in that state. Everyone knows something is about to give, and it's not just cartels; it's also Islam, which is what's been coming across your border. And I know that is a personal fact. Let me come back to Greg Scroggins. So what Greg was telling me is, at the time that he would come and he'd pick your dad up, and your dad would be in this garden, and apparently there were these big trees there. And you're out in California, at least at that time you were. So these weren't quite redwoods. This is where the redwood forests were. They're very large trees. He said on some occasions, or at least on one occasion, that the trees were just swaying as if God had just moved through, and your dad was out there praying, and he would be exhausted. So, and this would be on the way to these meetings at the very time that many of these prophecies, like the one you just played, were given. So really the prophecy doesn't start there with the praise and worship. It really starts that morning out in the garden while he's praying. It starts on the way to the meeting. And then in the meeting, it's kind of culminating in the praise and worship with what he's giving forth. And in those meetings, he was seeing this figure that we now know as Donald Trump, because it's actually in the prophecies, who would be a trumpet, would have two terms, and who would throttle the enemies of the West and all of these other things that we've witnessed occur, but who was ultimately going to make such incredible breakthroughs that you were going to say, how is this possible as you come upon the year of 2027? Because it's really what the people tuning into this broadcast that you have that's what they're wanting to know. That's why they'd be listening to Brandon Biggs, or that's why they'd be going through your dad's prophecies. Or even if they're an atheist, why they would be tuning in just to find out, even if they didn't believe it, what does it say? Or they're one of the bad guys trying to figure out what's going to happen. Here's what's going to happen.
Yes.
Is that you're coming up on the parts of it that are going to be explosive. And you have to. And so at this point of it, you don't even need a prophecy to know that. But your dad who often said that he would come, he was serving and speaking on behalf of the God El Elyon. That's the God that Melchizedek gave offerings to with Abraham. El means God, and Elyon means Most High. That's who was speaking through those meetings. And surely the Lord does nothing without first telling it or giving it to his servants, the prophets. So that's what your dad was. He was a servant, the prophet. So one of the main concerns that your dad had, because you're about to get a big reward here in the United States. That's what That's what the prophecies were about. And you actually don't deserve that. And you're going to get that. None of us do. I don't mean that offensively. But whoever you are listening to this, the Lord is about to hand some rewards, and some people that have done some very guilty things. That's what the prophecies are stating. That you have this list of bad guys. There's going to be an uncovering of great evil. And they're going to fight back, and they're going to be vicious, and it's going to be scary. And you're watching them fight back. That's what's happening when you see bullets nearly miss the president's head. And by the way, that's not just in the prophecies, but that bullet has to come close enough where it nicks enough to see the blood. Otherwise, it doesn't have the impact with the American flag in the background. So it's not just the prophecy, it's the entire visual and the timing of what's happening that's a part of the prophecy. And the prophecies are even bleeding over into your life. That's a portion of them being given because the Lord wants you to become a part of what he's doing, of what he's about to entrust you with. Kim Clement said, you're entering a Joseph period. He said, I saw the spirit of Joseph and the spirit of Judas standing together. Joseph, which means to add, and Judas, which means to take away one, and the Lord will add. And he said, you're entering a Joseph period. How many of you want to be a part of this? Joseph is a Goshen period. Joseph is a period of prosper that's within a wicked empire, is the time he's describing you're in. And it's also, do you want me to keep going with this? Oh, you're
yeah.
Okay.
No, we're absolutely, yeah, we're just, as soon as, I just want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. I was just kind of keeping on going there, almost like the Lord was speaking, but so you're on your way to you're at the part of the story where some of the most exciting parts of this are going to occur. So what Donna read off there in those prophecies, that people will become very afraid. So there are going to be some scary parts of what's ahead. But for a lot of you, the type of people that are watching Donna's broadcast, you've been waiting for that for a long time. So the scary parts, I want you to be really excited about that, because the reason the Lord gave the prophecy is because he wants you to know that you're almost there. And the reason it's scary is because other people need to wake up. And people don't wake up if they're comfortable. They have to be shaken. And they have to be scared. And they have to see what it would have cost them. And they have to see what their bad decisions. A lot of people don't know that bad decisions will cost them everything. They don't know that the world is a dangerous place. While Islam and cartels, see, that's what Donald Trump is really stating at these dinners. They're stating it softly, but it's getting louder and louder and louder. And at some point, those cartels are going to respond back. So when he's clearing out those cities, or when he's blowing up those drug boats, it's not just about the drugs coming in, but you're also hearing that they were literally waging a war on you. They were trying to weaken you and kill you. They were trying to take you for everything that you have. And as someone listening to one of these broadcasts, you probably already know that, but many of the Democrats and people that have called you a fool, called you lots of names, you're about to be very vindicated. That's what the Lord is stating in these prophecies. Those very people are going to witness and see, because, see, they're going to be afraid. And you're going to look confident. And I want you to have that confidence this season, because I don't know what's going to happen with the economies. Everyone knows that while they're standing up there and telling you the economy is great, everyone knows that it's not. Things are about to go haywire in some direction, but the Lord has this. And he's put the right person there to do this, whether he's perfect or not perfect. And even with all of the haze of people arguing back and forth, so you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she's stating, if you just saw the Republicans in the back room, yeah, well, they've always been that way. It's not just cigars and brandy back there. If you could,
Right.
It's more than that. And when you see what Lindsey Graham is doing with the cigar, well, we actually don't want to know. But and we still run Candace Owens. I've got the emails. I've got the receipts. as Russia and the Jews.
But you're right. You see that this is the attempt of the enemy to fracture and weaken this movement, which is ultimately the Jesus revolution Dad saw. You know, we saw the response, and I'm glad you brought up Candace Owens. I actually addressed this the other day on Code Breakers. But you saw the response when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. It was horrific. But like you said, people were shaken. They were comfortable and they got shaken. And you saw immediately the response was young men especially standing up and saying, I'm going to church. I'm picking up my Bible. I'm going to be a better father. I'm going to be a better husband, putting on a suit, taking their families to church that Sunday. It was an immediate response. And this is the beginnings of that Jesus revolution my dad was seeing.
Yes.
But immediately the devil came in, just like he always does, and started with the accusing, and especially Candace Owens, who we are praying for. I'm praying for her because she is a voice. God can use her greatly. She is so talented and so intelligent, and I've always really liked her. But the anti-Semitism, which is demonic because she doesn't have enough of a spiritual covering, she doesn't know her Bible, and so it makes her vulnerable. And you saw the enemy come in through Kanye and others with the anti-Semitism, and that has deeply affected her. And then, with all the accusing. And so on Sunday at Code Breakers, we actually, it's more than a week ago now, the previous 2 weeks ago, Code Breakers, we prayed for her. But what you see is a pattern. The enemy knows, we've got to win now, just like when Trump came in. You will get resistance when you are doing what God wants you to do. The enemy is going to resist you. You will be attacked. You will, every demonic force, especially the more powerful it is of what God is doing, you'll find the enemy attack. And so that's a good example, the Charlie Kirk thing, because all those people focused on going to church were distracted by conspiracies. Yeah. So this is where I've been struggling too, is that the conspiracy theories, it's good to question, and we should, because much has been exposed. And to try to filter through in this environment has been very difficult. And that's why these prophecies are so helpful. But also important to recognize, knowing the enemy, knowing the devil, what he's going to try to do. We know his patterns. He's very predictable. He's not creative. So it's very easy to spot him. Yeah. And so, but again, we are fighting not flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. And so understanding that, as Christians, we need to be able to forgive people who are in darkness or in deception and pray them out of it, because we'd rather bring them over to us. Because, we are in after Trump was elected, I was telling everybody, we've won the battle, but now we're in the war. And so this year of Trump doing very strategic things with the economy, with tariffs and making deals with these other nations. He's fixing from the bottom up. He's creating a strong foundation for which to solve these economic problems. And the important thing, about Trump, is that my dad prophesied specific things about him. There's things Trump says and does I don't always like. I don't always, he's Trump. He's going to do what he does. But my dad prophesied that he would secure the border. He would build the walls of protection around the nation. And he prophesied, and this is going back to 2007 now, when Dad prophesied he would be a trumpet. And also the economy, how he would deal with the economy and his relationship with Israel. Those were the three top things that Dad saw Trump accomplishing. So Trump's not going to take care of everything. Dad also, on this day of February 22nd, 2014, that we're looking for, we don't have this today, but in there, he saw a young man coming after Trump. I don't know if it's immediately after, but he was young. In other prophecies, when he was in Miami, he saw him being Latino or Hispanic, being the first Latino or Hispanic president of the United States of America, and not being a big talker. He said he wouldn't be a great orator that they'll say this man is not speaking enough. That he actually said on this day. We don't have it. I just thought of it now, so we didn't include it with our clips. But anybody can go and watch this full day of broadcast on our YouTube or Rumble channels. Go to the website. Wherever you're watching right now, you can find this prophecy. But there's another part that is so interesting. And just the fact that Dad saw these things, and these are the things we're dealing with right now, is amazing in itself. But he saw a lot about Russia and Ukraine that day. And this was February 22nd of 2014. So my dawn had just happened where they overthrew and Lindsey Graham and Victoria Nuland were handing out cookies to the Ukrainians. But that was at the beginning of this, under Bush, Putin had taken Crimea, I think it was, and there was Crimea, there was Georgia. But when we got to that moment in time, this war, we didn't know this was going to happen, especially being such a drawn-out war in which every day President Trump is getting up and saying there are thousands of people dying every day, both Russians and Ukrainians. And, we got to stop this war. And Putin, who he thought he'd be able to negotiate with, has been very crafty, which Dad had prophesied that as well. And so let's have a look at this other clip. And this is where my dad sees God's fist smacking down on Russia. So again, we're at February 22nd, 2014. And Dad is prophesying about Russia and Ukraine. So we're going to have a look at that, and we'll come back.
And my fist is about to smack down on Russia. For out of the rebellion of the Ukraine, which was seen by my prophet, shall come out of those ashes beauty. Yes. Shall come out of that sadness joy. Shall come out of those garments praise, says the Lord. I have searched for a man and a woman who would stand in the Oval Office and pray and call for the restoration of the fortunes of Zion. I have looked for a man who would pray for the restoration of the fortunes of Zion.
So restoration, I'm writing it down. Restoration is a very important word because that is what's happening right now. The Trump administration restoring the fortunes of Zion. And that's not just money. That is a standard in this Christian nation that is a free nation. So you're not forced. Like if you go to any Muslim country, you're going to deal with being forced into Islam or facing repercussions for that, either being enslaved or killed or imprisoned or treated as less than. And that's to all these people who are about social justice. They always turned a blind eye to the things that they're doing over there in these Middle Eastern countries in which they would not themselves actually survive. Think of gays for Palestine, for instance. They don't actually have a good understanding of Islam because it's been presented to them in a deceptive way as the religion of peace and accepting of all races. And that's why they always want to shout racism as an excuse anytime you question them. If you question them, oh, you're racist. Well, you're Islamophobic, when that actually isn't the case. But what I find interesting about things is that this year we saw what happened in Iran. With Operation Rising Lion, President Trump intervening with the United States of America, their military, and taking out those nuclear sites so that Iran could not, because they were very close to getting a nuclear weapon, and they're nuts over there. And the thing about it is that the reason Iran was able to be taken over was because the progressive liberals joined hands with the Muslims in Iran, and they were going to overthrow the Shah and no longer have a monarchy, which is what their desire was, but they were tricked. And many of those liberals were killed shortly after the Iranian Revolution when the Ayatollah took over Iran. And so you see this coupling of communism with Islam today. And this is the thing that Dad was seeing. He saw it many times in prophecy. Russia will join its hands with Iran. and Syria and gather as many people as possible to come against Israel and the United States of America. Dad prophesied that on a different date. And so today, in this particular prophecy on February 22nd, 2014, you're seeing him refer to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But you have this issue where Ukraine is wanting to join NATO, is being supported by the West. And you have Putin over here who has joined hands not only with China, another communist country, but also Iran. And there's the buying and selling of oil and all the whatever's going on with them. There's a lot of detail. But Dad, standing in 2014, God shows him Russia and shows him Ukraine. Now, the good thing about it is that we know that out of the ashes will come beauty, and out of the sadness will come joy. We just heard him prophesy that. But that means there have to be ashes and sadness. And so we have seen, and it's very limited because of conspiracy theories and, Ukraine's done this and this and this wrong. Well, Russia's done this and this and this wrong. At the end of the day, you are seeing this war being dragged out. And they are running out of young people. They are running out of a generation of people in both countries as a result of this war. And, people want to say, well, Putin is helping Trump stop the globalists, but that is not what's going on. And I know this because of what my dad prophesied. He prophesied particularly about Putin, that eventually he will turn around and go back to where he came from. That God said he's going to put a hook in his nostril, turn him around and send him back to where he came from. That he would die by the sword in his own land. And that it would take a servant's broom to sweep up the many webs that he's woven. Now, these are multiple prophecies my dad's given about Putin. I'm just culminating them into because I've been following this for so long. But you see how he refers to God has searched for a man and a woman who would stand in the Oval Office and pray. And today, we have that. That part is fulfilled. And so we know that ultimately this Russia situation is going to be taken care of. But I think that many have been deceived by Putin, including Trump, who felt like he would be able to easily handle this war, and he had such a good relationship with Putin. And again, when Trump is saying he has a good relationship and he's speaking nicely of them publicly because he's making deals with these people. If he wants to make a deal with Putin to end the war or whatever else he wants, he can't be bad-mouthing him publicly. And that's very important to Donald Trump. So, people are like, oh, well, he's friends. No, he's not friends. He's not hanging out with these people. They're not going to dinners. He's being smart. He's being wise in how he's dealing with these dictators who have big egos. Oh, we have such a good relationship, everything's, because he knows that he has to be careful what he says. Otherwise, Putin, who is a lunatic, Dad referred to him as a junkyard dog when he prophesied about him. He said he would be released and he would bite viciously. And so we're seeing him being very deceptive. His goal is the return of the Soviet Union and retaking of those territories and more if he can. Dad saw the Baltics, he saw Estonia, he saw Poland, he saw these neighboring countries having to fight. Just recently, we're seeing headlines of Great Britain and France, who normally don't work together, warning their citizens that they must prepare for war with Russia. So although we have not seen the complete fulfillment of this, we are in the middle of this part of the prophecy. And so God there in the prophecy is my fist is about to smack down on Russia. And I believe that's because, Putin may be trying to help Trump with the globalists of the West. But those globalists aren't the only ones, and that's truly what I believe. I think that there's more than one group who want to get control of the globe. So there's that sort of shadow war going on with the elites that we're only seeing what we're allowed to see. But I think that is a part of what's going on here. And so, Putin may help Trump, but to his own end, because he would like to control the globe. And so you see these, Dad referred to them as these little men, and how God was going to topple the short men. We actually recently did a broadcast on that and on that prophecy. So the tensions are rising in Ukraine, And we're watching very closely, and we have been, and we thought it would be taken care of already. But I was not surprised because of what Dad prophesied about Russia.
Yes, so these things should continue to break in the United States. I mean, that's what I would expect to occur, Donna, is that you're in the part of the prophecies where you're heading out of this. You're heading out of this. And so the portions of it that remain are kind of explosive parts in my interpretation of many of these. So you mentioned there Russia and Ukraine and these wars that happen. The next part says, he said, while these cats and dogs fight, America will begin to bloom and America will begin to prosper. So if I take us there for just a second, so let me give you my impression of what I have felt like these might mean. And I've been wrong on these a number of times, but let me kind of crash course through it since we're coming into this year of 2026 that goes to 2027. So it sounded to me like he was stating that while these cats and dogs fight, that whatever's going on here, it's about to bubble up and explode. And also whoever the bad guys were here in the United States who were doing the stuff with elections, and be careful with my words and all of that, that you're about to hit heads with that. That's what I gathered the other day from, Trump did a press conference. He was talking about Tina Peters, and off the cuff, he's stating, you've got more of this coming out, which of course, most of us already knew. You can see that direction. I think on the other side of the coin, they're starting to get a little bit nervous about that, which is kind of weird to watch them at that moment, because you've got all of this evil that's been done by many of these elected officials, and there's these glimmers in their eyes. Oh my gosh, I might actually be in trouble for this. I think a lot of the ground that they believe they stood on was removed a long time ago. And just if I were to best guess it, that this has been in the works for a long time. In fact, probably in the works, Donna, back at the very time you and I even started talking. But let me keep going with that. So whether Russia is a good guy, a bad guy, or whatever, because I know exactly what you're talking about on that. So people will say, well, they're clearing out the deep state. Well, they probably are. So Russia's interest is going to be whatever Putin believes is best for Russia, which may or may not be correct. But it sounds like he's going to be mad and he's going to go do some other things. If I were to interpret this from what I'm hearing, like he's going to say this isn't enough and he's going to go forward, because God was saying, well, these cats and dogs fight. So they have cats and dogs. It's got quite a few of them. America will begin to bloom and America will begin to prosper. So if we go back over to that front, what it sounded like, because your dad was talking about I remember years back, there would be a wall that wouldn't be completed for a takeover.
Takeover.
Yeah, and now that's a stunning one. That's one that I didn't want to play because I'm like, well, surely that can't happen because there's two terms and it must mean something else. But that actually gives you an example of how concise that the prophecies are. They actually would not be true had it not worked out the way that it did precisely, with there being a pause, if you will, between the two terms. The Lord did that. There's no hand of man that could have done that. But what most people speculate is that behind the scenes, there's a whole set of military actions that are happening, which I tend to believe, and that the Lord is with the hands of those people as well. And that you're about to see exposures that many people have been waiting for, because the hardworking people in this nation, they're taxed to the hilt. They don't, I know, because I'm one of them, you're one of them. You're barely clawing your way ahead. And the people you're really fighting against, a lot of these liberals, and it's becoming visible now, are people that really aren't paying for anything. One of them is an old roommate of mine from 30 years ago or 25 years ago. I'll look at him and I'll remember it. He would know all the right forms to fill out. He didn't work at then, and I worked doubles. I remember that. I worked at a Subway and I worked at a car lot at one point at the same time, but I worked doubles. I was never not working, and this guy was never, and he was just always complaining. And it's the same thing today. And he's the one really voting against you. He's the one voting that all the burden on your back get heavier. He's the one that they're importing illegals to help that vote so they can steal from you. And those systems and those shackles, which were never what the founders intended, are about to be broken. So with respect, yeah, go
Yes.
ahead.
We've seen. Well, I was just going to say we've seen that really exposed in what's happened in Minneapolis, where Ilhan Omar and Tim Waltz are with the Somalians,
Mhm.
and the using COVID-19 to steal, essentially launder tax money,
Yes.
not only for themselves but to Somalia in enormous amounts of money, $6-8 billion. I don't even know what the number is now. And so we are seeing those things being exposed as well.
Mhm.
And it's part of something bigger.
Yes.
And like you said, there are the things that are going on that we cannot see, that we're really not supposed to see. And if you remember, this was also in 2014, a month after this prophecy we're looking at today. Dad prophesied about, it was March 20th, I think, 2014, where he saw the Malaysian jet. And in that prophecy, he kept saying, you don't know. You're not supposed to know. And so that to me is also very interesting, because what do you mean we're not supposed to know? Well, because these are classified things. There are things going on that they can't just come out and say, because we'll know, but then so will our enemies know. And so that's why you have classified information. You have to protect things that if that knowledge were to get out, it would be a danger to the citizens. And so he was hitting on those, I would say, that classified information in that prophecy, but it was all around the same time period. And so,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead,
Well,
I'm done.
this haze of people. This one said this, and this one said that, and the other one's doing this, and this one's got this emails and that, and the Epstein files, and all of this noise that's coming at you like a wall. I don't know how much of that is made up and how much of it is real, and also I don't really care, because in some sense it doesn't matter. Part of the solidity of these prophecies, and even in this last year, is that just like a ship going through, those waves are going to part to the right or the left. And by the way, it's the Lord that's either doing that or allowing that to happen as well, because it's a disruption in the midst of something that's coming through that's very direct. And the Lord has put the right man there for exactly the points that he's got to hit, and I have a lot of trust in that. And these other men that are in there, such as Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. By the way, these are in my view. I don't know them personally, but I can take a look at them, and if there is more going on there that they're not telling me, I'm very comfortable and happy with that, because this is what I know from these prophecies and the Lord in general, and in the last number of years, is that whatever the Lord is doing through these sets of people, it's going to meet the right spots at the right moments. And it's going to be for the right cause. And you're going to watch eyes open. And so you were talking there a minute, you don't need to know, because he talked a lot about classified stuff. This would be a time period of undercover where I'm going to bring out from the covers
Yes.
the truth. There have been too many lies and too many deceptions. America, you're not as secure as you think you are. I think you're about to come on the explosive parts of all of it. So, and I think two ways that
Absolutely.
you can respond to that. You can be afraid of it, because it may make all sorts of things like the financial systems and all of. I mean, the biggest way to scare people is in their wallets. I think there are big changes that will come to that, and I have no idea what any of those look like. I've tried to think about what those do, but I know how they end, because that's actually covered in the prophecies. And so let me be brutally honest with you in this portion of telling you about the prophecies. The way that I've always interpreted the end of it is that it does look like the bad guys all spring up suddenly, which would make sense, because they didn't just go away. So all the fraud and all the bad stuff they were doing, and you've been blowing their boats up. Look, if you hit them, they're going to try to hit you back, probably, right? And they're gonna get a, if this is one of their last punches, they've got to do a hard one, right? So
Yes.
so it's going to be scary. But the Lord said He's got this. He also wants you to witness that this is the spot. And it's not really all the devil's fault either. It's where we got ourselves. But in the course of it, one of the things that I believe Kim would want is for all of you to be very, very comfortable with it, even if you can't be, or you have to force yourself a little to be. And not to be happy with these people. There's going to be some people prosecuted for very high level stuff. Your dad said that there would be hangings in the end of this. Careful with that language and this kind of, and I identified, I don't know what will be hung or what would, maybe it was, some people said maybe it's a metaphor. I don't think it is. I think you've got military offenses that have happened in the course of these things where you're headed towards, right now you're blowing boats up out there in the ocean. And you're not just doing that because those boats are running drugs. You're doing that because you had very serious problems that are being rooted out of this United States. And that you've been at war in ways that are very unique, which is what's described in the prophecies. And that at some point, you're going to hit a point where those bad guys, he's starving them out financially. That's what's happening with each of these things that's taken away. And at some moment, like an animal that's trapped, it's going to have to claw because those people didn't have a way to make any money or to live the way they did and to do all these things they want, all these evil things they wanted to do, if they couldn't make you pay for it or blackmail you out of it or hurt you for it. What Kim was describing in those prophecies was a removal of all of that burden of paying for bad people off of your back. And therefore, it's like, oh my gosh, is this even possible? Because you've never known, even in our lifetime. I'm looking forward to it, to finding out what does that feel like. And that's what I believe he was describing and what you're about to walk into. And go ahead, I see you have you're thinking about something there.
No, I was just agreeing with you because
Merry Christmas, by the way, because this is the Christmas of the year this is a gift from the Lord to you. And the Lord said, when I weigh the scales, so he was looking at the United States and he was saying, you haven't been great. All right. That's the frank truth of it. You let a lot of bad stuff in, but there's a lot of people that have been praying. And also some of these people that have been martyrs for the cause, and there's a whole list of them, including your father. So Erica Kirk isn't the only widow. There's a lot of them in this story, including that lady Tina Peters that's in jail. There's a lot of people.
Including Tina Peters, absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. And she's going to be sprung out of there. And a lot of these people that have lost all the things that they have and that have worked, and they feel like they've squeezed out the last of what they've got, the Lord sees that. And by the way, that's a large portion. That's probably all of the audience listening, because the reason you're listening is you're trying to figure out what's going to happen next with the things that are coming in the nation. And that's the very reason that the Lord gave the prophecies. And I want to...
It is the very reason, yes.
And I'll be quiet with this. I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas because, and thank you for inviting me on to do this show with you, Donna, because we're about at the part where we know that some of the parts that are explosive ones are going to happen, and whatever exactly that will look like, because we speculated or been wrong or right, or it's all over the years. Then retrospect, you're like, oh, that's what that meant. So those are the parts you're about at, and you know what it will look like when it ends. And even the bad guys do as well. They're starting to look scared over there. So, and they watch these prophecies too because they're terrified. And part of the reason that you got people taking shots to the head, and this man Charlie Kirk got shot, and that's whether it's a whole group of people in the back, but there's something very demonic. There are wicked forces that are in a rage. There are two your dad said there were 2 terror organizations that were waiting to be pierced with the sword of the Lord.
Yes.
But whether there's a whole set of people behind it, which I highly speculate, and that's okay if Kash Patel and Dan Bongino know more about that than me, I'm totally cool with that, as well as a lot of other stuff, because when you're doing a large-scale sting operation and you're blowing up boats in the coast, you can't always share everything that's going on all the time. But what I can tell you is this, is that when you've got speakers that are out there just proclaiming the name of Jesus, taking shots in the head, you got heavy stuff going on. And something is about to burst.
That's right.
Something's blood vessels in its head are about to pop. It's so mad. And it's about to come out from under the covers. And
you are sort of seeing that. You are sort of seeing that with people in the way they're behaving.
Yes.
Especially the way people behaved in response to Charlie Kirk's assassination, which was so awful. But There is another part of this prophecy I want to play for you
Okay.
that has not come to pass. And you know this part of the prophecy. It's about the Supreme Court. Because he saw two from the Supreme Court stepping down from the embarrassment of what will happen. And, you know, we've had people pass away, die, who were on the Supreme Court, but we've not had people step down.
Right.
And so that's been very interesting to see that. So let's have a look at that clip, and then we'll come
Get it.
back.
Watch how I change everything, for there shall be those who are in justice, and there are those who are in a strong position. I'm just hearing this now. In the highest court in the land, what's it called? The highest court in the land, the Supreme Court, two shall step down for the embarrassment of what shall take place. For I wish to place in the highest court in the land righteousness. And they shall attempt to put others in to endeavor, to reach their endeavors. But God says, hear me tonight. Hear me today. I have this whole thing planned out according to my will.
Okay, so that one, that's very interesting. He sees those who are in justice. So you see him kind of picking up those who are in justice. Highest court in the land, Supreme Court. Two will step down from the embarrassment of what will happen, right? But then he also goes on to say, they shall attempt to put others in to reach their endeavors. Now that's packing the court, which we have heard them screaming and shouting on the Democrat side about that, about expanding the number of justices in the Supreme Court, because they don't have the majority right now, and they don't like it. Now, however the Supreme Court works, you know, we could discuss that. But what's interesting here is that you have that theme coming back. Same with the Snowden that we started this broadcast with. A new Snowden will arise. Highly embarrassing moments for many, many politicians. And then you come over here as Supreme Court, two will step down from the embarrassment of what would happen. And I think the frustration that people have right now in general is that we're seeing the exposure, but we're not seeing the justice. And that has happened all through this year with the Trump administration, where many people were expecting very swift justice and things to happen quickly. But they need to remember, and I have to remind myself of this as well, is that this is a war we are in. And like you mentioned earlier, the other side is not just going to say, oh, well, Trump won, I guess we lost. Oh, shucks. And just give up. They are up to all kinds of things right now, trying to figure out a way. And they've struggled because they have been so badly weakened, and they really don't have any kind of leadership on the Democrat side. They've really done themselves a great disservice as a political party in going so far to the left, in engaging in this extremist and then making their platform about that. Like politically, it's not very smart. And they know that because these people do this for a living. They know better than I do. But a regular person like you or I can look at that situation. It's very clear what is happening.
Right.
But what we keep seeing promised, especially in this prophecy, but in a lot of them, is that God would shake and expose. And I've found with these prophecies, it's very important to be patient. Because anytime I've tried to rush and say, oh, this is the Esther. No, that's the Esther. Yeah. And every time I've been wrong. And so I've learned a lesson from doing the code breaking that we do with these prophecies. And Dad termed it code breaking. And that is really what happens. Even here on Analysis, we're analyzing these prophecies. And God has given us just enough. Dad used to joke, and he would say, why does God only share a little? Why is it we prophesy in part? Why is it we see through a glass darkly? He said, because if we knew what God was going to have us do, we wouldn't do it. So God just gives us just enough information that we keep moving forward in the direction. Right. And oftentimes there are surprises along the way. So I know this Supreme Court, two stepping down, it's all tied in with the exposure and the shaking. But this is reshaping the Supreme Court that is in place right now. In Trump's first term, he was given that opportunity to elect conservative justices. Now we had under Biden, we had a liberal justice in there, but that's as we watch this all kind of play out, we see there is, like you said, a culmination, a moment where something will be done. So like I was saying, people are frustrated. I'm frustrated right now because you see, oh, well, this one's done this and that one's done that. And we know it's true. We know they've done it, but nobody's doing anything about it. That's what it seems like. And so, I encourage people to just keep praying and to be patient. But what do you think?
Well, so in that set of prophecies right there, that's a very famous one that you're playing, and that one actually has these 2 points in it. Where in one point he said there were, it was like a veil was placed on this nation, and I did it so that for a season my people would wonder. For in darkness faith grows, and for in despair faith grows. And he talked about kind of these hard things and these troubles that people, because you're gonna go through the darkness and then you're gonna come out of it. Now, in the course of that, you get to that part about the two will step down, because God is when he says, oh, I'm just getting this now. So in the mix of this haze of what's going on, I'm just getting this now. God wishes to put righteousness in the highest court in the land. And what's interesting about that is that if it turns out you've got more trouble, so you've at least got an auto pen with Joe Biden. So this Kenji Brown that they put in, they really didn't, what they did was replace an older one with a younger, hardcore, woke one, is what they did there in the case of that lady. So I think you're about to have some major changes, because the Lord finishes that portion right after he talks about two will step down from the Supreme Court from the embarrassment. He says, watch how I change everything. I've got this all timed out according to my will. According to my will. Now, and a lot of people compare this entire time period to the Exodus story. An Exodus time period is where you're going through things a stage at a time where you can examine them. So you're seeing a little bit of dirt before you're seeing a larger bit of dirt, before you're seeing how bad it really is, before you're seeing, it's like looking at a wall and you see some maybe like, I think there's like some bugs coming out of there, and then you go check and now it's all like, you're like, ooh, and it's a whole wall and it's crawling, and now you're really tearing stuff down, and you're talking about, can we save the structure? And I think that's where you're at with a lot of things in the United States, because you get to a portion in that very prophecy, the one you're in. So this is all at the time. This is all very near the end of your dad's life, when he was seeing sort of things that culminated for this time, the same time frame that the Lord was saying that he was stating. If I were to share, there's a long-term plan, and if I were to share what I'm seeing, I wouldn't be alive next week. Those were the kind of words he was stating at the time he's giving these prophecies. So, but in that particular one, where the two step down from the embarrassment at the beginning of the prophecy, at the start of the prophecy, he said a veil has been placed upon this nation. So when you're talking to your neighbor or your friend or that weird person down the way, and they just don't believe you, and it looks like you're all crazy out there. And even people, there's a veil on this nation. Blindness is actually a curse. It's used repeatedly in the Bible as a curse. Being able to see is a blessing, and say, oh, I know where I'm going. Or even if I don't know where I'm going, at least I know if I keep going this way, I'm not this way or this way. That's actually a blessing. How does that prophecy end? It says, as if scales fell off of the eyes. And I saw them, they were one. Scales falling off of the eyes is symbolic of, oh my gosh, how didn't I see this? Oh my gosh. Yes. Like it was that heavy. And realize. Yeah, like, oh crap, that wall really was full of termites. And I was sitting here and they were crawling on my feet, and I kept like dusting them off and stuff. And I knew they were coming from the wall, but I was doing this other thing. And now that I've torn this piece off, it's like all roaches in there. And oh my God, what do I do? That's where you're about to be at. But here's the good news, that there's a lot of good stuff. At least you saw it. And there's a lot of good structural support. And that you're surrounded by the people that are exactly good pillar and termite restoration people. And you got people with the bug
Yes.
spray standing right there, ready to go. Well, look what I'm holding. I'm holding exactly what I need to spray on. Right? The Lord is putting all those people in place. Okay? That's what he's stating. I got this all timed out according to my will. That he's the one orchestrating it. And he's doing it because of some of the commitments I believe that he made with this nation.
Yes, that is true. Well, you know what, Trey? We had a couple of more prophecies, but we're kind of running out of time.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do here is we're gonna skip ahead to a new kind of war against America, and this is also on that same day, February 22nd, 2014. So let's have a look at that, and then we'll come back and discuss it before we say goodbye today. So go ahead and play the new kind of war prophecy.
And then there is a nation, he showed me and took me, itching for a new kind of war with America. They will shout, impeach, impeach, they say, but nay. This nation shall come very subtly, but he shall not come in the time of President Obama. They shall come when this new one arises, my David, that I have set aside for this nation.
Okay, Donna, so my immediate knee-jerk reaction, because here again, I mean, these are the prophecies at the time period that your dad was stating that if I were to share the things that I know, I wouldn't be alive next week. He was sharing those prophecies, and I can tell you that a lot of what he was, so in the car rides he would take at the time he was giving those prophecies that we just watched, many of them would be with Greg Scroggins, and one of the heavy worries that he had was about Islam. And if you look at other prophecies, so that's what Greg called about just a couple of weeks ago. But he was talking about even at the time that your dad was there, that they had this long-term plan to intermarry with the girls and the boys that watch all your movies, and how the White House has been taken down. And you can see that this is the plan to intermarry and to intermingle. Mm-hmm. So my guess has been the entire time, Donnie, that at some point in this, you're gonna get hit, and it's gonna look afraid. Yeah. It's going to look scary. So yes. While the common guy, and the common guy being like one of the roommates I grew up with, he's always telling you, oh no, you're overreacting to you. You're like conspiracies and stuff. Because they've lived in a delusional world, right? A delusional world where everything is censored away. When you turn off Safe Search on your browser, the world is a pretty dangerous place. And many of these countries, even in doing some of the Christian documentaries these documentaries I've done, there are countries, particularly Islamic ones, I won't go back to. I didn't know they were as dangerous as they were at the time I was there. Had I known, I would have never gone. And that's coming.
Oh, absolutely. I would never survive there, and you know that.
Yeah.
In any Middle Eastern country, I wouldn't. As a woman, I would not last 5 minutes.
So when your dad said they have a long-term plan, that means that they've funded and they put a lot of thought in it, and that they were coming, and that they had a plan. They're in cahoots together. They're at a table. Yeah. So when your dad said, I was sitting at a table and there was Putin and 4 others, and they were writing things down, which I'm not allowed to talk about now. That's what he was stating in the prophecy, which I'm not allowed to, but I will share it with the right authorities, whoever that was in his mind. But my point is that he was hovering above a table, and there's Putin, and he's with others, and they had a mixture of different clothing on, and the hand of the betrayer was at the table, whatever that means. But the word that's overriding in all of that is deception. And let me tell you another thing, another little story that he told in the midst of those very prophecies, one that pops into my mind right now. So he said that there was... he said it will be like this. He said there was a man that went and he came across a bear. But he defeated the bear and he overcame the bear. And he was so excited about himself, and he went on the road, but then he came across a lion. The lion was going to attack him. But then he defeated the lion. Now he's defeated a lion and a bear. Now he felt safe, and he went into the house and he put his hand on the wall. And the snake got him as it came through a crack in the wall. And he was talking, and he said, and this is what I saw surrounding this time period of this vision with this this table of people who had who had a plan, and the plan had a long-term plan, and that he was speaking of. He directly stated the betrayal of the United States. So I think what you've been witnessing with the explosions of these drug boats, the cleaning out of many of these cities, isn't just to clean up the streets, which it is. Having a clean street. I mean, it's weird to wake up in the morning, you turn on the news, and it's like an action video game. Here's who's died, and there's another explosion, and here, take some vaccines, and no, the elections are safe, or just trust us. All of this other crap that it's all. You're just listening to an arsenal of lies coming your way like this, just pure sewage coming right through the screen. Mm-hmm. What he's stating is that some portion of this was a long-term plan against you to take down the United States. That wasn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't that's literally what was happening. And
well, they're openly saying it now.
And when he's,
I mean, there's video after video I see of Muslim leaders in America, in Australia, in the West, celebrating terrorist attacks, openly saying, you're not having enough kids, we're having a bunch of kids, and within a generation we'll be outvoting you, and it'll be easy to take over. And I think when Dad's seeing a new kind of war, I've also looked at, China. What's China been doing to us? They're sending fentanyl in through the border. They're buying up property next to military bases. They're up to all kinds of things all the time. And so we are seeing in an era where there's so much new technology just flooding us. It was like we got the internet in the 90s, and then all of a sudden you get social media, and the next thing we've got AI. And it's just increasing in speed and volume. And, within that, I think Dad wouldn't have really understood that in the time that he was in. But as a prophet looking forward, through obviously the Holy Spirit, he could understand some of what he was seeing. But a nation itching for a new kind of war. Well, a lot of the warfare we've been living through is a new way of conducting warfare, because they're not coming in with their military trying to take over. They know they can't beat the United States military or the military of the West just by doing that. And so they've come up with other ways of infiltrating our society. And through the universities and schools is another way. So we have the border, and you've got the universities and the schools, and they're indoctrinating our children to where they're coming out and shouting, if you dare, all these kids are pro-Palestine, and if you criticize anything to do with Islam, you're Islamophobic or you're racist. And so that puts them in this protective bubble where they're just getting away, and they're really getting away with so much now that we're seeing across Europe, across the West, people canceling Christmas markets and Christmas celebrations. In France, they're not going to do their regular New Year's thing they do this year everywhere, because these countries who have subdued themselves, I'm trying to figure out how to say it, who have sort of given in out of fear of being called a racist or Islamophobic, are justifying the rape of little girls and letting these, they don't understand where they come from. This is happening in England all over the place right now. They don't understand where they come from. That's how they do things. And excuses being made for despicable behavior. So when I look at that, and then I think about Dad with the Beast of the East, he started to prophesy the Beast of the East in 1993 when he had the accident where he broke his arms, and God started to show him the warriors of the new millennium. Then 1996, he shows him 9/11. And all of these events that God was showing him, the enemy is always common, and it's the Beast of the East, which I, at this point in time, believe to be the Muslims and the communists. And in the Western country, the liberals are the communists. The liberals are the ones who want the communism. So a great deception has happened, and it's happened as an infiltration from within. And so when I look at that is what I see. There's more actually to this prophecy. We might have to do another one of these.
I don't
so we can cover the rest of this prophecy because we've run out of
I
time.
don't think
But
there's as many of them, Donna, as people think. And I will tell
yeah,
you that, and I'll just be real quick about this. When they began doing the deportations, so I go back and forth, or at least I did at that time, to Colorado quite a bit. And we're not there now, but when Tom Homan came in, right when Trump was elected, the Walmarts were empty in Colorado, and I had no idea how, like, it was just aisle after aisle of being empty in the state of Colorado. And I think that in Arizona, I think there are certain states where there have been hardcore stuff going down that's a combination of the cartels, it's a combination of China, and a lot of this stuff being imported from Venezuela. I think you've physically been at
yeah,
war with the cartels in Venezuela being a conduit for the election stuff. I'm being kind of careful there what I state, and but also the drugs themselves being a type of a weapon. The importation, of course, for the votes, and also to be kind of a muddle of attack against you. But the actual what you would call a Democrat Party. So you're in Nashville, Tennessee. The days of Andrew Jackson are gone. So I don't think it exists. I don't think many of these people, and I'm going to be careful how I state this, and let me be real quick. So coming out of Colorado, many years ago, I witnessed, when I first got into ministry stuff, I witnessed these elections revolving around abortion, where back then there was not mail-in voting. So, but as a volunteer going around with this personhood movement, you could clearly see at the main locations, if you were going to get the Democrat vote, it'd have to be in downtown Denver, or Arvada, or Aurora. I can't remember the names of all the areas, but anyhow, we went around and around to them. And there were just lines of, you could tell, conservatives, people against abortion, that were voting for this abortion bill. And yet the abortion bill won by a third. And I remember that very clearly. And getting back, and that the national news programs, is the first time I saw this, and YouTube and all that. I wasn't even on those things at that time. They were fledgling companies. I think they existed, but I remember seeing that for the first time. And there wasn't mail-in voting or any of this other crap at that time that they've packed everything with, which are like new forms of it. But it wasn't just that it had been cheated, or whatever kind word you want to use for it, but the visible reality was that it had been overtaken by a lot. And they were coming through the screens, the comedy shows, the late night comedy shows, and stating, those stupid Christians thought they would win.
yeah.
And I'll be limited with what I say there because we're still on YouTube. But I think you're coming on a time. In other words, there wasn't any support underneath all of that. And I remember going door to door in Colorado, and this was way back when, and what I learned about the support for the abortion thing. And this is just an example. I would go to all the Democrat houses. That was my job as a little volunteer, and I was trying to be good. And all these people, I thought it was a good thing to do as a Christian, get up at these horrible hours in the snow and go talk to them. But here's what I learned from it, is that the conservative people were going to vote, which you could physically witness on election day. So they're there in line in the awful weather to stand in line and go cast their vote for it. And the Democrat people think that there's so many of us going to vote, which there really wasn't, is what I learned later, that we don't have to go anyway. They didn't know the date of it. They didn't know when it was. And this was a majority of them. There were some rare exceptions, like the ladies in vagina hats. But they're really, this wall of them coming at you is largely an illusion. It's a cardboard wall. It's like a building made of cardboard, but it looks like a building. And I think what you're walking through in your dad's prophecies is that stuff like that is about to be kicked down, and that a lot of it was put in play by your intelligence agencies, which is what CIA movie isn't running cocaine and stuff. So that's how you set up with Venezuela, with the boats that you're doing now. And those people don't want to get out of power, right? That are in the CIA and these other agencies, right? So you got to make sure the elections are, you have to blackmail those people. They might do their own thing. They could fire you. or tell you can't do something, or of course they've got to be blackmailed. I mean, what are you, stupid? We're the CIA. Of course I got a dead body and some cocaine in the trunk. I mean, I look at the badge. I mean, I think that there's some things that are about to break in the nation, and that wall of people that has been against you and against all of you. I want you to have a very Merry Christmas on the other side of this, because I believe, and I've been doing these shows with Donna periodically on and off since about the time that your dad died. I made a video on the Trump prophecies, and I watched this grainy Kim Clement tape, and I felt like this is what's going to happen. And people said, no, it's not. You're stupid. We Hillary Clinton is going to win. Look at the odds. And that's not what your dad said. So I remember that way back when I was, and I could hear, and on the night, and I began to believe their voices. That there's no way, oh my God, I've just screwed up. I uploaded that tape. Should I take the tape down? Because now everybody knows that I've stated this. And I had Christians calling me and stating, you did all this work with, talking about creation and God's all this. And here you've done this prophecy thing. And now we're all going to look stupid. And then I remember on election night hearing people cheering all across outside. That's how much people loved Donald Trump. There is not an army of jackasses out there, pardon my language, that are looking for higher taxes and looking for stolen whatever. There's not, Donna. And the things that your dad saw are coming to fruition, and the big parts of them, the explosive parts of them, are about to happen this year. And the greatest thing I could tell anybody for Christmas is that in this year, you're about to witness some of the greatest times, you've already been walking through them, that this nation has ever had. And God wanted you to know what those were in advance, no matter what they look like. And of course, it's going to be a real fireworks show, because this is God doing it. And he told you he was doing a fireworks show. They're Donna's father. He said, we're going to do a fireworks show, and it's going to be so big that the scales are going to fall off of even your friend's eyes that's a hardcore liberal, and say, oh my God, how was I this stupid? And you're going to say, I don't know. I've wondered that the entire time I knew you. That was a joke. I did.
I know.
So, but no, thank you, Donna, for, now you're supposed to take up a tithe, Donna, before you can't shut your show down.
Oh yes, no, we are. I was just gonna hear what you had to say, but you know what? Thank you so much for joining me for this special Christmas broadcast, Trey. I know we could just keep going on and on because Trey and I, we get to talking and we'll spend hours doing this, but we did want to just take the chance today on this Christmas, and instead of doing a traditional little Christmas broadcast, we really felt like we wanted to bring you something that, as you're sitting in your homes with your families, enjoying Christmas and enjoying one another, that we could give you something, to look at, as you're in this sort of downtime.
I would ask you to go ahead, whoever you are listening to this. I want to thank you for watching listening to this interview with Donna and I, and for years following these prophecies. If you're able to, and if you're not, don't you even worry about that. You support your family. But if you are able to and you want to, I can tell you this, that I've been this past year learning things about the Lord that I never knew. And if you feel compelled in your spirit, and that doesn't mean you always feel like it, then I know these people here, Donna, and there's a whole team of people back there that are all very good and incredible people. And I would ask you to consider supporting them. If you are supporting them, thank you for doing that. And also over at God in a Nutshell, the same applies. But before you give to God in a Nutshell, make sure that you, if you're able to. If you're not, then you don't worry about that. You make sure your family comes first this holiday season.
Always.
But if you can, I want to thank you for that. And I want to tell you where the tithing comes from. It starts with, because I've been putting this Exodus together and buying books like these that are from the 1850s. And Donna's dad, and I got these, the word Eber is where you get the word Hebrew from. And Kim Clement used to like these big books. One of the first times I ever met Donna had this big, beautiful Bible of Kim Clement's. When in the Exodus story, when Moses is at the burning bush, the first thing that God says, I'm the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And I have seen the suffering of my people. Many people compare this time you're into the Exodus period. I have seen the suffering of my people, and I've come to deliver them. And he's going to give a complete summary to Moses of what he's about to do, beginning with that introduction, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not every bush in the wilderness has this data. And that's going to tie back to this guy, Abraham. And the first time that word Hebrew is used, the Hebrews, that's who was there, Joseph the Hebrew, Moses is a Hebrew. But the first time Abraham is called the Hebrew, which is really the word Hebrew, is actually in Genesis 14. And it's right there when Lot has been captured. Lot is the troubled family member. He's like the liberal that you know, that is telling you that it will never work out, that's always in trouble. Lot's been captured and taken away with Sodom. God wants you to know that. And Abram the Hebrew was told that his troubled family member was taken away. And Abram went and he saved his family member, and then he went and he gave tithes through Melchizedek, the king and priest of Jerusalem, ancient Jerusalem. This is where the whole story starts. So the whole Exodus and all of this that God is doing, right? Because that's God's version of history. When you're reading Genesis, you're really reading what God told to Moses, which begins at that burning bush where he says, I'm here to do a great deliverance. And you're going to go in there and you're going to tell that big bad Pharaoh that I'm sending a dusty nobody sheep herder to tell him you've got my stuff. And I'm going to systematically take everything away from you. And you know why I'm going to do it? Because I, the God of the universe, El Elyon, the God that Danae's father would always often say that word, it is El Elyon speaking now. That means God Most High, El Elyon. That's a heavy word to be coming through. So all these things that are being stated, oh yeah, there's a fireworks show coming this Christmas. This is the year he's been talking about, one of them since the beginning of the book. He's been looking forward to it. These guys are going to see a real show. But at that moment, what Abram does is where you get the concept of tithing. And I'll stop, I promise I won't keep going. Is right there in Genesis 14, the first time that the word Hebrew is used. The root of something. Always notice the root of something. But that's what God's pointing you back to. He went and he gave tithes after he saved his worthless, troubled family member who never could see the light. And then the next thing that happens is the king of Sodom. You could replace that with with Satan. King of Sodom, Satan, they're interchangeable. Comes and says, hey, let me buddy up with you. And Abram says, no. I only serve the Lord Most High. I'm not taking even a strap of leather from you, lest it be said that the king of Sodom or Satan made Abram rich. And God loved that so much. He was so impressed. Think how little it took to impress God. As you flip the page, the next page, this is where you get that covenant of the pieces, which guarantees that land where that first offering was made to El Elyon through Melchizedek, the king and priest, right there in the heart of Jerusalem. And I want to thank you for listening to these. And I know that the Lord sees, just like he does in that prophecy, what we do and what we don't do, what we say. He's seen your struggles. He's seen all of those things. And I want to thank you in advance just for watching this. And I want to thank you in advance if you decide to support the ministry of Kim Clement, which Danae has faithfully done for years, and a whole team of guys behind her. And I want to thank you for that. And don't tell anybody about it, because otherwise you'll be bragging. Because the Lord sees that. And he's about to do a work in this nation that is so over the top that you're going to say, how was this real? And I know that because many years ago I sat and I listened to when everybody said, oh, it'll never happen. It'll never happen. They'll never get this one. They're always saying that. They've been saying that since the beginning of the book. And then on the night Trump won, and this is just one of many of the prophecies all across, where people were cheering and crying. So if you're wanting the Lord to bless you, and I want to thank you in advance. I thank you for the interview today, and Merry Christmas to each and every one of you.
Oh, thank you so much, Trey Smith. It's just an honor always to have you. And yes, everybody, that was just so beautiful too. But everybody, Merry Christmas. And thank you so much for joining us today. And if you do want to support the ministry, if God has put it on your heart to do that, we are so grateful for you. If not, for those of you who have supported us since my father's passing away, we we would not have been able to share these prophecies the way we have. And it's because of you and your support that we've been able to get what my dad prophesied about President Trump to President Trump. And so many people have been blessed by this, and it's helped to carry us through a very, very difficult time, an unprecedented time. And so we're so grateful to you for your support. The information on how you can support our ministry is on the screen now. You can also partner with us. We have the Vault Partnership, and that has just been incredible. We've just launched in the past year, and such a blessing all of you have been to the House of Destiny, and we hope we have blessed you. And once again, thank you, Trey Smith, for joining me today, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
God bless you. Merry Christmas.